Whoops. Hello, Global Theater. My name is Jerry Fialka. Today is December 20, 2022. We want to thank Rob Grant and his amazing podcast, I'm Probably Wrong About Everything. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here with Paul M. Helfrich. Paul, what an honor and a pleasure. Where in the heck are you calling in from?
I am calling in from Topanga, California.
Geez, you'd think I'd read the subtitles here. My script has me doing things beyond my audience comprehension. So sorry about that.
Oh, it's all good.
Okay. The first question, Paul, what is the best thing for a human being?
I think the best thing for a human being is to have a nice meal and a beverage and a good conversation with another person.
Oh, that is cool. Nice meal, beverage, and conversation. I like that. That's pretty down to earth. What's your favorite form of information, how it comes into you?
I think auditory for me.
Yeah.
Sound takes me to places. I'm visually oriented too, but the auditory thing for me, I'm an auditory learner too. It's a learning style, I guess, listening more than just overstimulated with visuals. So yeah, in the auditory. That probably has something to do with me being a musician too.
Listening is a key. It's the key to music too. How cool. Why do you think humans collect or gather information?
Oh, I love these questions, Jerry, because it's like a Rorschach test. There's no right or wrong answer, but let me see what I'm getting here. Why we store information. It's our collective memory so that we don't reinvent the wheel. It's like, how did we put that together the last time we put it up? Let's write it down. Our collective memory, there's something about that too. And I think in the modern mind, because of our overstimulation with technology, screen time, media exposure, our memory is not as strong as it's been in the past. And this is a story I tell my fifth graders. I teach at the Westside Waldorf School in Pacific Palisades about Socrates and the stylus writing that came in vogue in ancient Greece around, 500, 400 BCE. And he was solidly against it because he thought writing things down on a wax pad, we would lose that oral tradition. And he was partially right, but he was partially wrong too, because writing things down with all the complex information we have to deal with, oh my God, if you look, a sheet of computer code, for example, HTML and all that business, you can't just memorize all of that business too. But, back once upon a time, thousands of years ago, people memorized books, entire books in India. We just did a block on ancient India with my fifth graders, the Vedas and the Mahabharata and all of these great scriptures. Those are still to this day memorized, thousands and thousands and thousands of lines of verse. And you see this in the Islamic world too, memorizing the Quran and verses from the Quran and memorizing them flawlessly too, and that they're passed down from generation to generation flawlessly with minimal distortion. So there's a whole, you got me off on a whole tangent here, but yeah, information.
Well, it's amazing because, I take notes while I'm doing these, and for 90 minutes, a lot of the time my head is turned down. And I know if I was a viewer, I would be miffed by that. It's like, you're not giving him eye contact, looking into the little green dot that's the camera. But both you and Joe have a great sense of presence on a Zoom because to look into the green dot and you're not looking off. But, when I take notes, what you were talking about, writing down, I'm listening, but it's almost secondary listening because I'm concentrating on what you just said, and then I have to think that I'm listening closely as I'm writing the note down. So I agree with Socrates in what McLuhan would say. Writing has services and disservices, because we can flip a disservice into a service. But I'm curious, Paul, if you think this need or want to collect information is more innate or more invented?
I guess there's aspects of both, but I think it's innate. I think it's just something in our DNA that urges us almost subconsciously to build, to evolve, to increase the complexity, to not just stay at a certain stage of development for eons and eons. I think humanity's gone through stages like that. There's, there's the fossil evidence. Not that that's anywhere near a complete picture, but for over 1,000,000 years where there's just stone tools, simple stone tools for 1,000,000 years, nothing else for 1,000,000 years. That's hard for me to wrap my head around, but so there's something innate in survival and cultural development and growth and whatnot, but what takes that systemic thing to the next tipping point? And I think there's innate help that's kind of hardwired in there, just waiting for the right life conditions to open that up. And suddenly it comes as inspiration, this invention, the wheel. What if I put wheels on that thing we've been carrying around by handles all this time? Let's put some, that kind of a thing. Suddenly, it just radically changes. Where does that come from?
Do thoughts create emotions?
I think, yes. I think, of course, our thought process, when we make associations and connections, it's going to trigger emotions. So yeah, I'll say they're involved with our feelings. Our thinking and our feeling are intimately, they're separate modalities, I think, but they're intimately related to each other.
Yeah. Fill in the blank. I don't know what I think until I
do it.
Yeah.
Just, deeds, actions speak louder than words, doing things. And it's like, oh yeah, that's what I meant. That's what I thought I meant. That's what I thought I was doing. Oh God, I really did something quite different, didn't I, than I had planned.
Chomsky says a language is not, oh wait, I left one out. Sorry. Can humans think without language?
Yes. Language is a wonderful construct. We're using it right now, but there's a glance, a touch. There's other means of communication too. So yeah, there's different ways to communicate between people.
Two great words, Paul, glance and touch. Chomsky says a language is not just words. It's a culture, a tradition, a unification of community, a whole history that creates what a community is. Language doesn't work when language breaks.
You're breaking up a little bit for me here, but
You want me to repeat it?
if you ask the question at the end of that, yes, definitely.
Yeah, the question is basically, what do you do when language doesn't work, when language breaks down?
Well, didn't Chomsky also talk about nonverbal communication? Like 90% of our communication is nonverbal. So without the language, but when that breaks down, yeah, we're in trouble, aren't we? that's when the shit hits the fan, and it's like, no, that's not what I meant. And now we're going to war over this, and so suddenly a Rubicon gets crossed, perhaps through anger and things building up, all that business. The history of this planet that we're on.
Well, this is a stupid question. You already sort of tackled it, but are we more feeling beings or more thinking beings?
Well, as a teacher, I have to say there's no stupid questions. And I mean that. I'm not being Pollyanna at all. There are no stupid questions. So bring them on. What was the question again?
Are we more feeling beings or more thinking beings?
I think it depends on the individual temperament, and there's a balancing element that they're always trying to come into balance, and then a little too much thinking, a little too much in their head, or a little too much, just a little too spontaneous there, too much just driven by feeling and impulse. And, they complement each other wonderfully. So and that's something in Waldorf education. We talk about willing, feeling, and thinking. It's an epistemology, fancy philosophical way of saying what's the nature of truth and whatnot of how we know what we know, the truth and what is true. So through our willing, through our feeling, through our thinking, they all work together in different ways. So and we need it all, and to be integrated, to be healthy, I think, to not be in a state of pathology or illness. Those three modalities are balanced to whatever degree, and they can get out of balance per your original question. Some people are just so cerebral, those teachers that are just in their heads giving you fact after fact, and you're like, so okay, the Battle of Hastings was 10, you know, but like, take me there, put me in the armory, let me smell the saddle and the blood and hear the war cries, and, you know, oh, suddenly my feelings being engaged and other things. So yeah, it all works together, and it can be out of balance.
I like that. So your three are willing, thinking, and feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And then you brought up the word truth. So I got to ask you this. Louis Buñuel, the filmmaker, said, I'm for anyone who seeks the truth, but I part ways when they claim they found it. Now, 90% of people I've said that quote to go, that's great, I agree with that. But one person finally challenged it and said, well, that's bullshit. If I'm going to seek something, it's because I want to find it. And so I sort of morphed it into this question. If the journey is more important than the destination, why do we have to name or seek a destination if the journey is more important?
And so we don't ultimately. I mean, that takes so many years to understand that it's just the journey, and the destinations are typically illusory in varying degrees. So you get whole philosophies and social systems built up on those destination points, and we're marketing this destination, we can sell it to, you know, we own the rights to this, all of that nonsense that we have to deal with in our capitalist commercial world. Yeah, it is ultimately just about the journey, and the destination. Well, you know, we ultimately come back to where we came from, wherever that is, which is, you know, consciousness with a capital C, perhaps.
Wow, this is really enlightening, Paul. I'm learning a lot, and you're really articulate. I feel like I'm understanding what you're saying. These are two questions from Alan Turing, 1950s. Is thinking a function of the soul?
Definitely. Good old Alan Turing, the Turing test, right? I did an exhibit during my science museum days and on computer science and networks and whatnot. And yeah, the Turing test was something that in science museums they actually have, and you can go into an exhibit and sit there and take, you know, is there a person back there or not? Anyway, but
Yeah.
The soul is the source of thought in my worldview and my understanding of human ontology, which is another fancy way of saying the nature of being.
Yeah, that's good. The second Turing question is, can machines think?
Only if they have souls.
Wow, that's a great answer.
The answer is no, you know, until they become ensouled. And what is it? You know, that's a great sci-fi kind of theme in the last 50 years, last 100 years. When does that machine, right? Metropolis, that great movie from the 1920s. When does that machine, that robot, become sentient and sold? Is it, God, would you want to be trapped in a robot body for eternity? I wouldn't.
Yeah, that reminds me of Phil Lesh, Grateful Dead, and Frank Zappa's favorite sci-fi book is More Than Human by Theodore Sturgeon. So we've been tackling that very issue. Do you more pursue happiness or more pursue meaning?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I love happiness. I'm all about being happy, but in the end, it's really the meaning. You know, the meaning. When I look back on my life, what does it mean? What has it meant? What has it meant to me? What has it meant to others that I've known? The meaning is ultimately the most important thing. Even though it's a construct, even though it's relativistic to our consciousness and our being and the limits of our physical senses and our belief structures and whatnot, it's still what meaning we squeeze into the precious moments we have on this planet that ultimately, I think, define who we are as a person and as a species too. So,
Yeah. Does the brain more detect consciousness or create consciousness? Like, is consciousness there bubbling away and we're detecting it, or are we creating it?
the brain is a filter, a physical construction into physical energy. It's light solidified into physical matter that then is a filter that sends all of its inputs back to the soul in its spaceless, timeless place of origin. It allows us to experience this physical world with these wonderful physical senses that we have, and occasionally some inspiration and imagination and intuition just takes us to the next level too. Yeah.
Really good. You anticipated the next question beautifully. What's faster, speed of thought or speed of light?
That's a great question. And I go into a Zen Gordian knot with that one. I'm just looping around, but I'd have to say ultimately the speed of thought is faster than the speed of light, because thought is transcendent and it actually slows down as it enters the physical realm. As it enters the physical brain, it is slowed down to so that I'm in time, linear time here. But I think in the state of origin, if we were in our dream bodies having this interview, it's a simultaneous. It's we're almost merging. This linear back and forth doesn't happen. So, and that's the thought process from the soul. In my investigations about these matters.
Simultaneity. Really well put, Paul. That really resonated with me deeply. So Audre Lorde said you can't dismantle the master's house using the master's tools. Yvonne Rainer responded to her and said, you can if you expose the tools. What new tool do you suggest?
And it's the oldest tool. It's that we've lost, and I'm speaking systemically now in terms of modernity and the Enlightenment and modern era, and then what we can call loosely postmodern. Not the French schools, Derrida, Lacan, Foucault, those guys, but just post-industrial, post-modern. It's consciousness that got thrown out with the mythic religious baby bathwater over the Enlightenment. We threw out the capital C, and now we're down to this little c that was just a brain. It's, as Ken Wilber, one of my dear teachers, says, frisky dirt just got up and started writing poetry. It's like, no, I don't think so. I don't think it works that way. So this consciousness with a capital C pre-exists. It's primordial. It pre-exists and it's eternal, so on and so forth. Even in the physical world, its aspects are there.
Yeah. Really well put. Paul, what new toy do you suggest?
So the toy is really meditation. Yeah. Getting the thought stream slowed down, getting the feeling stream slowed down, using that willing force to center your being. And as Ken wrote a book called The Simple Feeling of Being. And it's really that simple. This divine spiritual consciousness that we are nested within is just apparent in that simplest moment. So the tools that we need are to get back in touch with those things for our inspiration and our innovation and our artistic impulses, and coming up, with new things, rather than reinventing. Let's reboot. What franchise can we reboot from the 60s? For what movie hasn't been done by Hollywood at this stage of the game, right? We're all looking for what's the new story, what's the emerging new story that'll get you another $1 billion franchise when you stumble upon it.
I love that. What's the news story? I really love that. What do you worry about when you go to bed at night?
Just speaking as a Waldorf class teacher, I take my kids into sleep with me. And it's a simple practice of reviewing the day, how things went with so-and-so, and just getting an impression. And it's not a very intellectual process. It's a feeling process. And you take that into sleep. and you work on that invisibly. These are our, what I call our Jedi mind tricks, because this shit works. I can't explain it rationally. It's trans-rational. And so then what I'm concerned about with this child, whether it's a language arts issue, or a social issue, social emotional thing, I take that into sleep, and darn if when I get back to school, something comes up through intuition or inspiration about this is what she needs, this is what he needs, or this is what the group needs, or this is what these two groups need. It's an amazing thing. So I'm using my worry, my anxiety closet constructively. That's just one example, but that's speaking professionally as a teacher. It's something that I worry about with those children because I'm responsible for their well-being.
Wow, I wish I would have had you as a teacher, man.
I wish I had me. I know.
That is some good. So McLuhan learned from Ezra Pound, the poet, that artists are the antenna of the race. They're broadcasting and detecting the hidden psychic effects of our inventions. So we might learn to cope with what we don't like about the inventions. So, Paul, I asked you the question Marshall probed his whole career. Why do we ignore the hidden psychic effects of our inventions, even though the artists are broadcasting them to us?
Yeah, I think it's a kind of, schizophrenia, kind of denial, coping mechanism. I think of, is it Frank Oppenheimer? One of the inventors of the atom bomb, and when he saw that explosion, he said, "Shiva, the destroyer is now released." I mean, and Einstein, when he saw these weapons being built based on his research, wow, we're responsible for all of that, and that's a heavy burden.
Yeah. Do artists have moral obligation?
Absolutely. Primarily, first and foremost, to themselves, to be a moral individual to themselves. And you can see that in people who are healthy, who present themselves in a healthy, vital way, that they're not, with the, and they're telling you one thing, but you can see, thinking of those pictures of Hitler during 1945, when they're down to children in the Reich, and his hand is shaking behind him, and he's giving medals out to little 13-year-olds. He's no longer presenting a healthy, face to the world. It's pathology.
Wow. Are you more afraid of new ideas or more afraid of old ideas?
That's a great question. It's probably a mixture of both. I'll say the old ideas. I'll lean into the old idea because that's the conservative way, the way we've done it, and the way we know it. It's what's holding things back, but it's also what's holding things together at the same time. So there's this give and take about newness. No, we want to break down that institution or that way of doing things. We want to allow African Americans into Augusta National Golf Club now. No, we can't do that. We haven't done that since 1793. That kind of a thing. So the past is really, really powerful in that way, and overcoming the past in a healthy way is what these new tipping points in the evolutionary current, if you want to call it that, present to us. So the other side of the newness, though, is these, AI is an area of concern. The amount of algorithms out there manipulating us all through our cell phones, our screens right now is a little scary to think about. So the moral obligation to do the right thing, and who owns that, at the end of the day, it's something that's innate. It's an innate, according to Ken Wilber, and I totally agree with it's an innate moral intuition that we all have, that we know when we're violating, and then we have that feeling of being contrite, mea culpa. Yeah, I crossed that line. I'm sorry I did that. That's a healthy recognition of that moral balance that we have. But as artists, you have to be responsible for yourself and then unleash it on the world and see what happens. I can't imagine being in one of those bands where there was a crush and 11 people were suffocated.
Yeah.
Thinking of my, God, they were so excited for the concert tonight and we're all pumped up, and 11 people died because of what I did. That's a heavy burden to bear as well, but all these things happen for a reason, in my view.
Very, very much so. Brought up a lot of thoughts there. Can you conjure up your earliest memory ever, or one of them?
That's a great question. Yeah, I have a memory of being about 2, standing on the steps of my very first home in Ardsley, Pennsylvania. And it might have been around my birthday time, I'm not sure. And somewhere in that are memories of my bunk beds with my older brother and a birthday cake that I was mashing up mindlessly.
Nice. Bunk beds and birthday cakes and older brothers, man. I love it. Is memory more a curse or more a blessing?
Oy. It's
Oy.
Man, these are great questions. I think it's more of a blessing. I think we're just bound to go by instinct and just be it of a more animal consciousness, driven by instinct and impulse. When we have a memory of something that we're saying, I'm not going to do that again, or I am going to do that again because I will get a great crop, or I will get a great meal, I will get a great mate, I will get a great treaty from the other group of people, whatever. Memory is really important for that. God, right? Yeah.
Good. Now, Paul, tell me someone, please, within your immediate family, then outside your immediate family, who had an impact on you, just briefly. And what specifically was that impact? Kind of like a role model.
Yeah, I have to go to my dear old dad, who was an electrical engineer, worked at RCA, and I grew up with oscilloscopes and magnetic tape recorders in the basement at his workbench. And he just, that affected me. I think that helped build my love of electronic music when I was ready for synthesizers and recording technology and whatnot. And then on my mom's side, God bless her, she's still alive, 91 years old. My father passed many years ago. She said, Paula, I'd love you to be a doctor. This was when in high school. You could be a doctor. And she meant medical doctor because that was the pathway to wealth and riches, I guess, in a successful career. And here I was, an artist. I was reading Thoreau and thinking of following the beat of a different drummer. And like, yes, that is me. I'm not going to follow a conventional path in life. But she planted that seed, and it led me into my academic studies, which I treasure. You don't need them, and Ian Anderson of Jethro Tull's a perfect example of you don't need any of that he can't even read music, and it doesn't matter. I mean, his song catalog and his musicality is just off the charts. One of my great influences in my musical life.
Nice. That was good. And then outside your immediate family.
Oh, geez. Yeah, okay. I go right to Beethoven. It's like a love-hate thing with Beethoven. He was like the Rick Wakeman, Keith Emerson of his day.
Yeah, he was.
A virtuoso, and writing symphonic works and, doing all of that. And I remember tripping on acid in college. And if any of my students are watching this, don't do psychedelics without the help of a shamanic expert. But
there you go. Nice.
This is a disclaimer there, but this is in college and watching Fantasia. And the first movement of Beethoven's Sixth Symphony, the Pastoral, Joyous Feelings Upon Arriving in the Country, played. And it is just the most elegant, wonderful thing. So Beethoven was one of my idols. And of course, the Fifth Symphony, the Ninth Symphony, and his piano sonatas. How do you play all those notes? How do you memorize all that stuff? I'm nowhere near that as a keyboard player. And so he was a big influence on me just in terms of that bum, 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 bum composer, and led me to my formal studies in music composition and arranging. Yeah, big influence.
Beautiful. Did your parents raise you a particular religion?
We were Presbyterians for a little while, then Unitarians for a while, and then my parents split, and that kind of stopped there. But so a Protestant, we were raised Protestant in a Protestant framework, and we grew up in a Jewish neighborhood Elkins Park, Pennsylvania. And so we were a minority there, and I was more Jewish. I'm more Jewish culturally because of my growing up there.
Do you pray?
I pray every day.
Wow. Do evil people exist, or does evil use people as a vehicle?
I'm going to take, people need to take responsibility and be accountable. So evil people exist, and you're going to be held to account, not in some great judgment, the classical, St. Peter judging you for, or the Hindu notions of being punished and coming back as a cow or an insect for your bad deeds. But there are evil people, and it's because they have fallen away from the loving light. They are not in touch. They're completely fragmented from their source. And so they're all alone. And what's left but to accrue whatever power and power agendas that they have: wealth, fame, possessions, power over people, power to tell people what to do, driven hard by those things, so hard that they cause a lot of pain and suffering that they don't quite understand, because that's not the important thing. It's whoever dies with the most stuff wins. That's a very modern kind of materialist view of the world.
You really suss it out. You give me a big picture view of this, and I appreciate that. And the sort of hidden question here, Paul, is how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? And I'll set up with a few modern thinkers. Alan Watts says, if you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them. Coppola stole from the mob and the samurais: keep your friends close and your enemies closer. JFK said, forgive your enemy, but don't forget their name. And Fellini says, I need an enemy. So it's a lot of thoughts. The basic question is, how do you, Paul, advise someone to deal with an enemy? But first, how would you respond to Alan Watts? If you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them.
Yeah, wow. We are here to be in relationship. I, thou, Martin Buber.
Yeah.
I, thou is the basic foundation of all the schooling that we're doing here in this physical world. So we are going to run into thous or others who become adversarial and even enemies to us. And we need those people in our lives. You have to go through this horrible cycle with that to realize that, and go through a lot of pain and suffering actually to come out the other end and realize that you learned something, you became even better and more resilient and stronger, so that the next time you run into a personality like that, you are not taking that shit anymore, kind of a thing, or you know what to do with it or how to address that. But I love, Sun Tzu, The Art of War, saying keep your enemies really, really close. It's actually very true, but that's a dance I don't want to dance in this lifetime. As Michael Jackson, God bless him, I'm a lover, not a fighter. That's a quote of his, and it's true. Not a fighter, not into that kind of conflict and proving my superiority by being able to dominate. Though I'm athletic and I love sports, I watch NFL football and basketball, and I really get into that. But otherwise, yeah.
That was good. I love that Michael Jackson quote. It's beautiful. It's sort of like the difference between MLK and Malcolm X. James Brown would say, I'm a little more Malcolm X, because if you hit me, I'm going to hit you back.
Yeah.
And what is that? So it reminds me of Nassim Taleb's quote, games were created to give non-heroes the illusion of winning. In real life, you don't know who really won or lost, but you can tell who a hero is and who is not. So I told someone that quoted, they said, well, villains don't think they are bad. They want control. Heroes want freedom. And even Bateson, the anthropologist, says if a criminal gets caught, do they go, whoa, I did something morally or socially wrong? Or do they say, my criminal skills weren't up to snuff that day I got caught? So the basic question, and any thoughts on the hero thing, is does punishment work?
Punishment acts as a deterrent in certain circumstances. So I support that. But there's also, I wanted to back up a minute about the heroic impulse that
Yeah.
I'm aware of, like progressive rock music, symphonic rock, that big sound, Wagnerian opera,
Yeah.
this big, big sound. There's a heroic impulse there. And Joseph Campbell's the hero's journey archetype, that influenced Star Wars and so many other storylines in our lives. That heroic impulse is huge. And we all have a hero in us. And you never know when it's going to pop up in the moment. But I think there's an innate quality. And I think that's something of the worldview, this postmodern worldview of what it's moving towards. This, some call it a shift in consciousness, but there's an emerging new worldview system, a global system, and I think this heroic impulse is driving it. Look at the popularity of Marvel and DC comic characters and the superpowers, right? We all want to be an X-Man, Aquaman, whomever, Thor, have that hammer, control the elements, superpowers, this heroic thing. And the individual has been elevated as well in the postmodern society, modern and postmodern society. The individual is still very, very important, not the collective and being fused into the collective like we were in pre-modern times, where we were fused into our tribal identities, our clan identities. No one stood out from the clan, or the tribe that we were part of. But now this individualism is there and this heroic impulse. So you see, extreme sports, people doing the craziest challenges, triathlons. I have the ultimate respect. I live in top of Topanga, which is 1,500 feet above sea level off of the PCH. And when I'm exiting sometimes and I see some guy or gal just coming, peeking up on their bike that they've ridden up, I just salute them. That's heroic, what you have done. So, yeah, it's a big, big part of the world we're in.
Really well put. James Joyce was the first projectionist in Dublin about 100 years ago. He basically checked out. He said, "This is stupid. Why should I go inside a building and see a movie of a tree when I can go outside and see a real tree?" Years later, Faulkner said, "Sometimes the best fiction is more true than journalism." Why do we have to recreate things in order to get them? Why do we have to go to a theatrical play of people acting out life? Why don't we just live life?
I think that's part of the rise of civilization and large city states and large cultures and community. It's a community experience, going to a theater, going to a play, going to an opera. It's a very social thing. Now we live in a time, in the pandemic, just where we're all streaming stuff at home, and we all have 75-inch LC, LED, whatever screen, and so on and so forth. And we're disjointed and disconnected by that technology. So being there communally and having to experience that, there's a lot of different thoughts I'm just trying to unpack here. I totally agree with saying, why would I want to sit in this dark, stinky theater watching a movie, and not a great movie, of a forest, when I can be outside in a forest with full immersion, the animals and smells and everything. And that's one of the beautiful things of Waldorf education, that we're very big on nature studies and being outdoors and being very healthy and so on and so forth.
Yeah, there's a lot there. And we're going to go into it right now. In fact, what was the tipping point for you, Paul, to choose your sort of career and a composer of music, a player, a musician and composer, and the tipping point to be an educator? Like, what did you study in high school and college, and when was it, that's what I want to pursue? That's my calling.
Looking back on my biography, the early part of my life was as an artist. Again, I read Thoreau in 11th grade, Walden, Following the Beat of a Different Drummer, Jimi Hendrix, the Grateful Dead. This was in the 1970s. And art, it was all about art at that time for me. But I had this kind of intellectual capacity and interest as well. And that led me to academic studies in music, just the career path. And so it was the artistic thing first. The first big job I got out of college with that PhD in music was doing a science and music exhibit at the Franklin Institute Science Museum in Philadelphia. So that initiated my second phase, which was the science education. And I'd always been good. I was a camp counselor as a teenager. So I enjoyed working with children. I enjoyed teaching. And I went into that museum gig and created a traveling exhibition of 3,500 square feet. I remember my boss showing me, we have to fill up the William Penn Gallery here. I'm like, what? in 8 months? 8 months to fill this up? What? But we did it. We did it. And over 2 million people would go on to see that from 1987 to 2000 and so when it was finally retired. So it was art, then science, education, and I hit a crisis point in my early 40s. And I said to Joanne, I said, I can't put this any other way. She's like, what, you want a divorce? Like, no, I feel like I have to become a priest. I have to become a priest. And that's the last damn thing I would ever do. And so it was a spiritual crisis. And that led to the third period of because I wanted to do PSI psi experiments in a brain exhibit that we did. I wanted to do ESP experiments, and it got shit canned. It's like, no, those didn't make the cut through the powers that be. That's not science. It's like, yes, it is, but it is nowadays. So that led to this spiritual journey that had us move out here to California 24 years ago. And that was then the third period, which was studying the world's religions, meditating, self-realization fellowship, Buddhism, all of them, Christianity, Islam, the Sufis, the mystical Sufis, all of that. And so, it was art, science, and spirit. And I came full circle when a friend of ours said, Paul, you'd make a good Waldorf teacher. And I looked into it. And as it turned out, it has an artistic, strong on the arts, strong on good science, and strong on a healthy, and I'll call it a postmodern spiritual scientific approach to spirituality, all integrated into one. So it's like the perfect storm for me to put all of my creativity. And I can't wait to go to work every day. I'm 67 years young at the moment, and I'm looking forward to another 3, 4, 5 years of full-time work before I say, okay, I've had enough of this. So yeah.
Gee, Paul, you're my hero. We're the same age too. I'm just going to turn 70 next year, and it's really incredible what you went through. There's one word that really gets me that you're talking about, and if you do the etymology on the word jujitsu, it's art and science gently. You do art and science, so it's that push and pull, that judo, where you're a comprehensivist. You get the big picture. You've studied the patterns. And you really found a path. I'm so curious about this. A screenwriting teacher told me great art is when you can clearly see the intention of the maker. Kubrick says the opposite. Great art is when you can clearly not see the intention of the maker. When you're composing a piece of music or say a musical, what role does intention play in the creative process?
Oh, it's everything. Yeah, the intention that you bring, because you're dealing with archetypical themes that are being expressed in the book, in the lyrics, in the words, and then in the music that supports that. So intention is everything, and it's when you get in tune with it, it's miraculous. The stuff just comes, and it just comes and it comes. It gushes. It's amazing. And you cannot buy this. You have to work around it and dance around it for years. And I'm talking about my creative process too, as a composer, arranger, and sitting down with a goal. Like, here's a song where so-and-so does this, and we're getting from here to here to here. That intention is everything. And then, of course, all your previous experience and practice and all the musical tones and melody and all your influences are all there bouncing around. It's like, is this a little more, Yes? Is this a little more Beethoven? Is this a little more John McLaughlin, Chick Corea? Which direction? Frank Zappa? we going into the theater of the absurd with this, humor, a little hip hop? What do we need? It's just wonderful to have a full toolbox
Yeah.
in this day and age of all these styles of music and tools in the studio, the electronic studio, that helps realize these things.
Beautiful. And so Duchamp said there's no art without an audience. How much are you thinking of your listener when you're writing your piece of music?
Well, thinking specifically of the musicals that Joanne and I wrote in middle school for my previous class, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, it was everything. It was like thinking about, we knew had a story. This has to be a big moment, where Hildegard is taking on the patriarchy. And so she's, giving them, and we got it. And so that is all part of so the music has to reflect that, And then there's the other side of it where it's like, you have a piece of music, I'll bring it to Joanne and go, here's this, what I call a jamming tune that I've been jamming on for 20 years on and off. So this is the feeling tone, I think, for this part here. Can you write lyrics to this? and match made in heaven, that she has this incredible skill to write amazing lyrics to the music that I outline. And she even writes melodies that then I will flesh out, and she writes lyrics for it too. So we have a very good partnership in that regard.
That is great. So McLuhan says everything we invent extends some humanness. He says the words human sensorium. So knife and fork extend our teeth. Clothing extends our skin. Even non-tangible like religion or philosophy might extend consciousness. What does the piano extend for you? What humanness?
Oh, it's, and I'll say my flute, because I play flute a lot. I'm a wind player, but flute specifically, it's an extension of the soul. And we are souls and flesh. So we're these eternal souls with no bodies, trying to figure out some way to get back into the physical game. And then we find a way through all the odds to get born again, come into the physical world, and then have an expressive outlet. And the piano, or the flute, guitar. I'm not a great guitar player, just the piano and flute. They take me to places. They take me to all that, wherever yes goes, wherever all those topographic oceans of yes, and the artwork. I'm forgetting the artist's name.
Yeah.
Where
it is a full package with the cover and the music. Beautiful.
Yeah.
That's cool. I didn't know you played flute. I love you. You really got a balance there with the flute and the piano for that sensibility. So what is the function of music?
Oh my goodness. There's lots of different functions, actually. There's pure art for art's sake. And I don't give a damn what you think about it. And here it is. There's an article I ran into in graduate school by Milton Babbitt, who taught music at Princeton back in the day. And he wrote an article, "Who cares if you listen?" So I have to respect that. But as an artist, I want someone to listen. If a tree falls in a forest, does it make a sound? Kind of a thing. So, artists, we need audiences, and we need to connect with an audience. And as artists, we have to build brand, so that's all the great artists out there have built some brand that we all tap into in some way or another. So the audience is such a part of it.
Yeah. In Copeland says the 4 elements or ingredients of music are basically melody, harmony, rhythm, and tone color. If you had to explain to a layperson, what is tone color?
Tone color goes by another fancy French word, timbre, the timbre of an instrument. So it's the specific there's this physics. This is the science of music. If we were to look at me playing a middle C on my flute, let's see, what do we got here? Playing a middle C on my flute, and you look at the waveform, and then play a middle C on a clarinet and a middle C on a piano. Why can I discern that they sound different? And it has something to do with the combination of sine waves that combine to make the sound. It also has to do with the onset of the sound, like a saxophone and a reed. So there's some reed noise into the onset of a sound. There's wind noise in a flute. There's the bow on a string on a violin. That's part of its sound, its tone color. And so, but when there's just a sustain after the onset of the sound, during the sustain, there's also different pictures, different sounds. It gets harder to discern when you have long sustained tones. You can get, a flute might sound like a violin or a sustained piano tone. So it has to, tone color has to do with the instrument, that's the physical makeup. A silver flute, a mahogany clarinet, a golden tenor saxophone made out of solid gold. Oh my God, it's so expensive. But the tone that you get from those instruments, and the Stradivarius, right? The string instruments, the resins that they use, and the way they get the formation areas of different resonances within the instrument, that adds to the tone color of that instrument. So, when you hear a string orchestra, when you hear a brass group, when you hear winds, when you hear a choir, those are 4 different timbres or tone colors in large areas that we all relate to, and we've heard and can connect with. So long story short, tone color is a physical attribute of the instrument that's making the sound.
Yeah, really well put. In those 4 elements, Paul, just briefly, how do you navigate them? Are you more like a melody, a harmony, a rhythm, or tone color person, or are you integrating all 4? What's your emphasis?
Well, I do integrate all 4, of course, but harmony, it's this English, I call it this English style of prog rock that is just the voice leading. Something we study at the university in undergraduate music and in high school is called 4-part chorale style. And it's soprano, alto, tenor, and bass. And it's pure singing. And it comes from the Renaissance style, where it was just choirs of singers singing in 2, 3, and 4 parts. So this 4-part chorale style of the human voice is at the basis of our harmony. And so how the soprano note goes to each subsequent note, how the alto, etc., all these voices, it's called voice leading. And the voice leading is, there's infinite permutations of the voice leading. So harmony, the melody and counter melodies and rhythms come out of that as well. But there's just something, it's like a feast. Certain chord progressions are just like a feast to the soul. It's like, that is so beautiful. And as you get more mature and understand the voice leading, you see all the voicings and all the great artists, great keyboard players, jazz, rock, whatever style, they know those voice leadings, and they idiomatically work them into their craft and write their great songs using those things, so that they don't dominate. They're actually in the background, and the lyrics can come out and dominate. That was
good. It reminded me of Thelonious Monk, who says that music is math. And he said, there are no wrong notes. Any comment?
Totally agree. Although, I don't tell me that when my 7th graders are rehearsing something in the string orchestra. There are wrong notes that I want them to tune better or articulate better. But I totally get that in terms of jazz, and it's your solo and you're improvising, and you're up and you got your 16 bars, go. There are no wrong notes then. It's really what comes out, and that spontaneity is what that little frame in the song for your moment is all about. In the classical repertoire, it's the cadenza at the end of a 3rd movement typically, and so they actually wrote them out so that you memorize them, but it was supposed to be an improv where you just went and jammed to show your technique off. And so that's, there are no wrongs. I just want to also add that John Coltrane taught me that music is religion. That was his church. And talking about the flute and piano as an extension of the soul, there are just these moments where I'm in the zone and I lose time and sense of self. And it's just this feeling of sound and energy and moving along. That is as close to the divine as you're going to get in a physical body, in my opinion. That's why music draws us to it over and over again, because we seek out those peak moments that are rare, but we all remember them. So beautiful.
Well put. I've shown that documentary on the the Church of John Coltrane in San Francisco. So they literally went to that, it wasn't just a metaphor. And Miles Davis talks about the space between notes. Can you talk about how you navigate silence dynamics?
Yeah, I mean, it is so critical. An expression, getting an expressive line that builds and comes back, so that's loud and soft, that it's like breathing. So it's organic in different ways, or like water lapping at the shore gently or crashing thunderously. Your dynamic content and the silence and the sound. And then also something that dawned on me late, relatively speaking, just the influence of noise and how musical noises, and just think of percussion music, a drum set hitting a rim shot, playing on the rims, the cymbal crash, a gong that has multiple frequencies. It's not in a C or an F sharp. It's got all of those in them. It's a whole spectrum of noise, and using noise with specific pitch, with silence, all of all the great stuff. All my greatest moments are when those things are all in balance. And it's just so beautiful.
Yeah, you cover the waterfront, Paul. You really are articulate about music. And I'm curious your thoughts on my friend, the 3 T's of music: technique, theory, and taste. You've learned the technique on how to do this on the piano and flute. The theory, the structure, the chords. How does one acquire taste?
Yeah, that's really what I go into musical styles, musical flavors, different styles of music. So there's different rhythms, different harmonies, different melodies in all of those styles. So taste, I think, is developed by, going to the smorgasbord, the buffet table, the feast of all of these things. And we are so blessed. And oh my goodness, I'm so envious of a young composer out there in their teens or 20s just getting started. You have an incredible future ahead of you with all these styles at your beck and call, all of these things with technology available to you for some money. It does take a little bit of money to get armored up with your computers and audio monitoring systems and all that business. But man, the toolbox that we have, this comes into, and it develops musical taste.
Yep.
Yeah.
McLuhan said song is slowed down speech. The reason cultures have different musical taste is ultimately connected to language difference. Any comment?
Wow. Say that again.
Yeah. Song is slowed down speech. The reason cultures have different musical taste is ultimately connected to language difference.
Definitely. Yeah. The rhythm of language is utterly unique. And that's why when I talk about the English style of harmony, there's Italian, German, French styles. This is speaking classically. Of course, the African continent is huge, and much of that's not come to the West yet in terms of ethnomusicology, and those different styles, and the drumming styles and the speech styles, the African languages that are there that are just amazing, African drumming and whatnot. So, and the languages, it is a reflection of language, the rhythm and phonemes too, the phonetic makeup of the sounds. There are languages that use pops and clicks that are very expressive as well. Not in the English or European languages, of course. But so
yeah, a lot of what you're talking about keeps reminding me of the Bulgarian women's choir when they actually charted on the English pop charts. And so, what's more fundamental, language or music?
wow, great question. I'm going to have to go with language, and because music is a language as well, but spoken language to communicate the word, and that gets back to the Bible. The word in the beginning was the word, the aum, the primordial tone, the primordial language of consciousness that everything is descended from. So there are just different parts of the same impulse humanly expressed different ways.
Tell me an instrumental that makes you laugh.
Wipeout.
Good, dude.
we
I
all
like
played we all played that drum solo in 5th grade on our desks, right?
Yeah, on our desk
You
or on
know,
the side of a canoe. I love that. That is one of my favorites. Oh, right. So Ben Ratliff, a music writer, wrote recently. It's actually in a book in Bill Frisell. He says, "I mean sound, as it has long functioned among jazz players as a mystical term of art. As in every musician finally needs a sound, a full and sensible embodiment of their artistic personality, such that it can be heard at best in a single note." So, me and you could hear Miles and know, oh, that's Miles. We could hear, Keith Emerson and go, that's Keith Emerson. And so he would say Miles is fragile and pointed, use 2 words. Coltrane is slightly undercooked and urgent. If a music writer that you respected was going to describe Paul's sound, say in 2 words, which 2 words would you feel most honored? And they got it.
I would say ambient and neoclassical.
Oh, that is so cool. And so I know what ambient is. Suss out what neoclassical means.
Neoclassical is really a reference back to that period from around, let me get this right, it's been a while, around 1750 to 1800 was the classical period, early Beethoven, Haydn, Mozart, where melody, harmony is just this, like the string quartet turned into the early orchestra with all the parts and voice leading and a bigger sound. That was the classical period. Then the Romantic period, bigger orchestrations, bigger, heavier bass. Church organs used. Wagner created a Wagnerian tuba to get this, big Romantic sound. And so as the evolution of that goes, people went, well, can we simplify some of this and come back to a neoclassical style is a little lighter, a little tighter. It's melodic, it's harmonic, it's got counterpoint. It's at the heart of prog rock, in my opinion. Yeah. Prog rock bands, that's a neoclassical style with electrical amplification.
Yeah. Beautiful. What was the motive of the cave artists? In regards, we have those documented somewhat. We don't have cave music or cave dance documented. What's your guess or hunch, the motive of the cave artist?
My sense is because it was there and it was in an evolutionary trajectory from less complexity to increasing complexity. The emerging early human consciousness had an image forming capacity. And so with memory, and they remembered animals and they remembered the hunt and they remembered perhaps what rituals they did before the hunt and how useful all those sinews and bones and teeth and hides were for building stuff and tools and weapons and whatnot. And this whole so these images that formed, and they wanted to capture them and honor them. It was like an early kind of monument making, in a way, to those animals, to those people, and to the gods and goddesses and the elemental forces that they worshiped and were much more in tune with than we moderns and postmoderns are.
Yeah, that's good. I like that. What's more important, conviction or compromise?
Oh, the middle way, Jerry, the compromise. With conviction, though, I will add, towards a middle way. I'll just put it, that's my approach to politics, economics, and even art, ultimately. And dealing with the I thou, with the other, and conflict that comes up in the creative process. We got to be flexible. I've got to give up something. If I give up something, you give up something. Can we both be happy with that and move forward together now? Together, you and I.
Oh, love it, man. Like I say, there's no right or wrong answers to any of these questions, but that one you got right, Paul. And you'd be surprised at how many people, it's 80% say conviction. But I love it when someone says compromise. It's like everybody's already convicted. Come on. That was beautiful. In your accomplishments, how do you rate these three elements, luck, skill, and ambition, just in general?
How do I rate them in terms of relative importance?
Of what you've accomplished in your life. How they played a role.
Ambition, luck, and
skill.
Wow, yeah, those are three very important things. Well, ambition is the will force, right, of what you want to do. Luck is inspiration, perhaps, in a way, those things that come through. So what is ambition, luck, and skill? And skill is that, what is it? 10% inspiration, 90% perspiration. You've got to work to develop your craft. I'm a craftsman, and I worked hard, and I continue to work hard to my last breath, developing and refining my craft. So that skill is really important, but you can build up and build up and build up. I am not a virtuoso flautist or flute player or pianist, but I can kill it at different times in different ways. And so, that skill set is from hard work, that perspiration. And luck, you depend on it. It's the universe giving you what you need, for better or worse at the time that you're aware of it. But the universe, I believe, is always hardwired for our best fulfillment, even during the dark and difficult times, that there's a silver lining coming out of this improbabilities. And that's why this has been chosen by me or with me, for me. So, in different levels of being, so to speak, that we deal with here. So we're nested inside of this big consciousness with a capital C. So there's a lot of help that we get. That's where the luck comes from. And the skill comes from that. It all comes from the same source, all of those things. So for this lifetime, this personality, that's all I'm speaking for. There are others.
Good. It reminded me of the more you practice, the luckier you get.
Yeah.
But Paul, where did you get your work ethic?
I got that from my parents. I definitely got that from my parents.
T.S. Eliot said poetry's outing your inner dialogue. What language is your inner dialogue in?
It is language and sound. I went through this thing in high school. I learned to meditate a little bit. I learned Silva mind control, a little bit of it. So I would practice these things going to bed, and all of a sudden I would start to hear piano music playing, and I could not play the piano well when I was in high school. This was sophisticated piano music was playing. Where did that come from?
That is cool. It's like you manifested what you were hearing in your inner dialogue. That's what McLuhan calls it, interior landscape.
Yeah.
So this is similar. The next question is, two of my film heroes have a mantra like ignore yourself. There is no self-expression. And Cecil Taylor, the great jazz pianist, says, I'm just a vehicle and this stuff just comes through me. So it's a stupid question. I mean, it's a question that's, of course, it's both and it depends, but just your thoughts on the idea. Is art making, music making more self-expression, or more you're a vehicle for whatever culture, technologies, and environments are dominant?
Well, it's clearly both, but what I strive for is where I get out of the way, and I'm a vehicle for this wider self, for this greater this bigger, you can call it the Akashic field. Rupert Sheldrake wrote a book on the Akasha. There's something so much bigger than us that you tap into, that you become the vehicle for. And you have to have your energetic bodies in alignment and your health well to handle those energies. People burn out. And that's, I think, some of them, particularly with musicians, what leads to drug abuse, because they mistake the high for that feeling they got when they were, oh my God, I'm riffing all over the place. You see, I'm Jesus Christ on this thing. And it's like, no, that was the cocaine. You weren't Jesus Christ, but yeah, you were killing it. You really were. But like, so to get that out of your way and become a vehicle without the drugs. And I'm a proponent, all for recreational in its place, but really as an artist, you want to be as free as you can, and let that come through you. And that's where, Coltrane's church was. It's just, this is where I am communing. I'm getting out of the way. I'm letting the divine light speak through me right now. Excuse me while I play my, sax.
Yeah. Can art making, music making be egoless?
Yes,
Yeah.
it can. And I think where I was just coming from is where your ego's out of the way and you're a vehicle for something more than you. You lose yourself your sense of self. So it's not Paul playing this. It's just whatever Paul was is riding on these notes coming off of my fingers. I'm in such ecstasy that my fingers are doing this and it's sounding so good. I just want to keep doing this. And I'm adding a thought process to it that's not there, but in that moment that it's happening. It's the spontaneous thing where it's just, it's a kind of unity consciousness, an altered state, perhaps.
Yeah, it's also a paradox. I worked for George Carlin, and we got a flyer in the mail one day, and it said, "I'm trying to get more control over my spontaneity." It's so like I interviewed Don Preston, the great keyboardist, played with the Mothers and Elvin Jones, and he says, yeah, don't think when you're, but you're, what you're doing, dude. I know what you're saying, and don't think, but there's still, it's a hard process. And I think what you did was articulate it well, Paul. That's what I really appreciate with this time with you, is that you're really good with words. What you're saying, I feel that I'm understanding. Is perception reality?
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah.
And what is it? Huxley, the doors of perception, if they were cleansed, then we would really know.
Yeah. Lewis Carroll says, I believe is 6 impossible things before breakfast. Have you believed in any impossible things lately?
Yeah. Peace in Ukraine.
Nice.
And a little more economic sanity on the world markets. Thinking of wealth distribution and inequality. And then let's jump into social justice as well, right?
Yeah.
People who've gotten the rotten end of things for quite some time, who need a hand, should get a hand and some help. Yes.
Yeah, it evokes Sun Ra. They quote him in New Yorker, of all places. The impossible attracts me because everything possible has been done and the world didn't change.
Perfect.
Tell me one major element, Paul, of your creativeness that's changed, and one major element that stayed the same in the years you've been doing it.
Wow. I think getting out of my way. Somehow getting out of the anxiety closet that I can't do this when I'm sitting down to write something that I need to get to a place. And I had an experience with Joanne. What was it? It was the seventh grade musical that we did. And it was the last song. So we're kind of tired and running out of steam creatively and whatnot. And there was a weekend where she gave me this melody and it's like, we got to write a song about this. And damn, if I didn't go in there and I composed it. I didn't just feel it. It didn't just come in. I actually constructed it from her melody. And I remember walking out of that room when I connected, because it had to be like an ensemble finale of 2 melodies being sung together during the climax of the song that had to work together and be introduced earlier. So it's like, oh, this is what you want for this song. And goddamn, if I didn't do it. And I felt like having overcome that bridge, like we can do anything that's put before us.
Right.
And so that is getting out of the way and just realizing we are capable of doing the impossible.
Yeah.
Seemingly impossible, or just really, 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 really damn hard, difficult. We can do that as well.
Moshe Feldenkrais works with healing and movement. He says it's literally possible to identify a weakness and incorporate it to become a strength, rather than we're normally taught to overcome a weakness. Tell me a weakness you turned into a strength.
Yeah, that's a great question. I would have to go to my divorce in 1985. Whatever persona I was at that time was humbled to the core, and it was a very difficult transition in that first marriage, having that fall apart. And the weakness that I would say was my interpersonal skills or lack thereof that led to that moment, and to reevaluate those things, and how, again, back to I thou, right? The relationship. How do I relate to you? How do I relate to a wife in particular? And so that was an absolutely necessary horror show to go through. And the silver lining was with this beautiful woman I've been with for 33 years now, and I treat her well.
Beautiful. When I met you two for just a short, let's say 3 to 4 minutes, it was really magical there at the Composers Breakfast meeting. And it was just like, wow, I want to, it was so funny how we connected. There was some sort of aura thing. I don't know, but
we were right in line together, and we were there getting our food together. And you had this very distinguished look about you, like this is some Hollywood producer, type individual here, and raconteur, that you are. So, yeah.
Well, it's been fun. We got about 15 more minutes, and this has been super special, Paul. I really appreciate it. Anger can be a productive emotion when fill in the blank.
When you keep a lid on it. So when you let your anger, dominate, that's when the shadow side is going to come out, and what I call your inner asshole is going to take over and lead you down the path to hell. So, yeah.
That is good. Inner asshole. That's amazing. Is that an original, Paul, or did you get that from someone else?
I think it's original, but you never know, right? I will claim originality until you show me otherwise.
It's because it's so much of what this next question's about. It's you create what you resist. Bob Goldthwait, the comedian, morphed it into you are what you hate. James Joyce said it's a curious thing how your mind is super saturated with the religion in which you say you disbelieve. And Louis Buñuel says, thank God I'm an atheist. So it's just, I'm not saying you, Paul, you create what you resist. One creates what one resists. Any comments on that thought?
I think that's a variation on this well-known law of attraction. So it's like in physics, the science of physics, sympathetic vibration. If I play a tone that's vibrating 440 times a second, there's another string right next to it that's not damped. It will start to vibrate sympathetically. And that's a way of showing one thing that's not being touched except by air molecules suddenly starts vibrating at a pitch. And it's attracted that way. The law of attraction. So, be careful what you wish for, guys. So words, thoughts, deeds. This is part of the Buddha's Eightfold Path. I have to throw that in there. We just went over that in our India block with my 5th graders. The Eightfold Noble Path talks about right speech, right deeds, and right thoughts. And so all of that comes into play.
Well, that's amazing. I'm trying to find this. Here it is. Frank Zappa actually talked about Pauline Oliveros in the LA Free Press in 1969 about her work with sound above the audible and below, creating a mass. And here's what Frank said, and I'm just curious. You sort of talked about it just now, sympathetic vibration. Frank said, not that it created a mass, it created something audible. It produced a sum in different tone which happened to be located within the audible frequency range. By combining something so high you couldn't hear it and something so low you couldn't hear it, it yields something in the middle that you could hear. Whether or not you like what you hear in the middle is another question. The concept is brilliant. So, any thoughts on that?
Yeah. Well, just on the physics angle that we've been exploring, some summary tones and difference tones are part of this sympathetic vibration. So, and God, it's been a while since I've heard of Pauline's work. It's been many years, but I'm generally familiar with it. And so she was experimenting with things way out above 20,000 hertz and way below, 60 hertz, which is sort of the realm of really, really, really good hearing, human hearing. And then with those low sounds, you can feel it though. Low sounds, you can literally feel. Elephants, they speak in these low frequencies that cover long distances. Whale songs also have these qualities as well. So any musician, who's curious, explores these things, is interested in these things. And what happens, a lot of it is spontaneous when you're just learning and you're in an ensemble. There's some summary and difference tones happening all the time that become idiomatic that you really like. And it's like, wow, what's missing? Well, Charlie doesn't have his golden sax with him tonight. He's playing a brass sax, and that has a different tone to it. And the sax parts are different tonight. You can actually feel the difference in sound. Something's off. Something's not right tonight. It's not clicking for some reason. And there's a physical reason to that. There's the physics behind it, perhaps. And then also, other reasons too. Physically, maybe you're playing something different too.
Yeah. It's like the atmosphere in the room, the air conditioning, the heater. There's so many factors involved. Anthony Burgess has this great line: "We must now ask some very different questions about the relationship between music and life." And I like that earlier on, Paul, you talked about this newness that you seem to pursue, that there is something new we can seek out. What question remains unresolved for you about this relationship between music and life?
Yeah, the unanswered, I think of Charles Ives' unanswered question. I am so spontaneous, I think, that I don't approach it in such intellectual terms that there's something that, like the Moody Blues, In Search of the Lost Chord, the Alm, that I've been searching for with all of this. I know my musical experience is just an experience of this physical makeup, this planet, the air. If we had hydrogen, the tones would all be different. If you've ever inhaled helium from a balloon and you talk like a chipmunk, the air, the vibrations of oxygen make my voice sound like it sounds right now to me inside my head and through the speakers to you. All of those things are variables that can change. So it's not. I don't have a question, but I will take that with me in a sort of Zen way of an unanswered question with music.
Yeah.
Going forward.
Well, tell me, Paul, can you go a little over? We got 7 more minutes. Can you go over, or you got to?
No, sure. Yeah.
Okay. Then I just know our parameters time-wise. But tell me, what is this Charles Ives unanswered question? Can you suss that out a little? I don't know about that.
It's been a long time. It's a piece that he wrote, not well-known American composer, and it's popular in avant-garde circles, and it's actually sort of foreshadowing some of the John Cage, 4 minutes and 33 seconds kind of concept pieces. But it's an instrumental piece. It's for a small orchestra, and there's a solo instrument that plays a plaintive line. Is that the question? It's a kind of Zen exploration that kind of went just beyond, I'm writing a piano sonata for my clientele and I will sell it and I will go on tour performing it. It was more this concept stuff happening in the 20th modernity was a
Yeah.
modern kind of a thing. So yeah, check it out. It's
Oh, I love Ives too, because you'll love this. I heard this great term to describe Charles Ives, Carl Stalling, and Frank Zappa. They're scavenger composers.
aren't we all ultimately?
Right, we all are. That's really well put.
I mean, we're
It's
scavenging into our toolboxes all the time. We're
yeah,
borrowing all the time.
yeah. T.S. Eliot said, "The mature poet steals, the immature poet imitates." In fact, I just got this new one. Someone said, Frank said in an interview once that a genius is someone who plagiarizes and you can't tell who they stole from.
It's true. That source. It's like
That's a pretty good one, because I mean, applying it to Frank, studying him for 50 years, it's his 82nd birthday tomorrow. We're
God bless.
celebrating it.
Wow.
Yeah, he's basically an Edgar Varese meets Spike Jones wannabe, with a little Johnny Guitar Watson thrown in on the side.
There you go. Scavenger.
And if I told him that, he'd go, "Thanks for the compliment." But this raises this one question. I'm curious your response, Paul. It's McLuhan in 1957. It's a little wordy. I'll cut it down a little. He says, "It's misleading to suppose there's any difference between education and entertainment. It's like setting up the distinction between didactic and lyric poetry on the ground that one teaches and the other one pleases. However, it's always been true, whatever pleases teaches more effectively." So that's really what I'm curious about. Whatever pleases teaches, and then what does more effectively mean? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I totally agree. And this is what I love about Waldorf education. And Rudolf Steiner, the founder of it, insisted on an artistic, creative approach in the classroom that the teacher has to bring. So you're somewhat of an entertainer in that regard. And we teach what's called a main lesson, and it's a 2-hour thing, 5 days a week. I do 5 2-hour shows a week with my kids. And so you've got to be entertaining them and you've got to be teaching them at the same time. So, yeah, having fun, and then the artistic impulse, movement, poetry, speech work. We play flutes, we sing, we do a lot of rounds, things in rounds for children that are 10, 11, and 12, starting to sing in parts, in rounds, and then they can sing 2 parts and 3 parts by middle school and whatnot. All of that is just so pleasing to do that. Yeah, you're gonna look forward to coming back to Mr. Helfrich's class tomorrow and see what he's got in store for you. So
How cool is that?
yeah, how cool is that? That is so cool.
That's it. My friends started Commie High in Ann Arbor, Michigan, community high. They called it Commie High because it was like you could bring your pets, eat popcorn, grow a garden, do the thing that pleases you. And people, that was when Summerhill was hitting, and the kid who invented Skype graduated from there. So it does work, but it sounds like hippie school.
Well, unfortunately, I hear our administrators say we're known as the hippie school, and I just bristle at that.
Yeah.
Because, we're into the academics and math and language and writing, and all of that as well. But the artistic impulse is really held high, and being creative and intuitive, we get pretty crazy and wacky with those impulses. And we have to be, because that spontaneity, I think, leads to innovation and novelty as well.
Yeah. Paul, can you forget to die?
That's a great question. I keep hearing yes and no. And I'm like, well, I want a binary black and white answer to that.
Yeah, yes and no is a good answer, actually.
Yeah, because if you define death as ego annihilation, no, you won't. You can't forget to die. You die.
Yeah.
Is the ego annihilated? That is the question. What remains after the body's turned off, and then the astral body, the etheric body, and the soul structures that are faster than the speed of light continue? What happens there? So it's a wonderful mystery that we're all going to find out the answer to. We have a front row seat when our transition time comes up. But I think you can forget to die.
Yep, I agree. How do you find peace of mind?
In quiet, in silence.
Yeah.
It's
Beautiful.
the balm for all things for me, in silence, and the resonance that comes from that. I always get my help that way.
Yeah, Thelonious Monk said silence is the loudest sound in the universe. Okay, here's 5 quick Alan Watts questions, just off the top of your head in a few words. Who started it all?
The one.
Are we going to make it?
Definitely.
Where do we put it?
Wherever we want.
Who's cleaning it up?
I will clean up my own mess.
Is it serious?
It can be, but I prefer that it's not.
Nice. Okay, got a few more and we're out of here, Paul. What a pleasure. Which way should toilet paper come off the roll, over or under?
Definitely over. The waterfall.
Why?
Because it's ergonomic. You just have to hit it down and it goes down. You hit it up. I don't know. So you can argue it both ways, can't you? It's just gravity. Put gravity to work. It's more, it's more effective.
90% of people say over. The patent has it over, but the small percentage of people say under have their reasons. Yeah. If you were walking down the street today and you met yourself as a 12-year-old, what would you say to your 12-year-old self?
Make sure you practice your instruments regularly.
Nice. If a publisher was to release your autobiography off the top of your head, what would the title be?
And another thing, ...
They want to scent the glue in the binding. What smell?
Roses.
Oh, nice. If a statue was built in your honor, where would you want it displayed and what would it be made of?
I would make it out of balsa wood and I would let it be displayed by the ocean so that the elements would break it down quickly.
Yeah, you just throw it off the edge on Topanga and it flies into the ocean. That's good, Paul. I like that. Tell me something good you never had and you never want.
$1 billion.
Yep, that's what I get the most. Money. If you were in a vat of vomit up to your neck and someone threw a bag of shit at your face, what would you do?
I'd duck into that vomit probably.
All right. What's the cultural shift you see developing today that inspires you?
I see the emergence of a new worldview that we can characterize as an integral mode of consciousness in the human being, in the human family. And it's a kind of systems awareness, connecting the dots, a global consciousness that thinks in systems and sees interdependencies and interrelationships. Think of Isaac Asimov's Foundation trilogy and Harry Seldon's psychohistory and his Seldon plan. And the mathematical equations. There's a type of consciousness required for us to not destroy ourselves and the planet, and the empathy to connect all around the globe to people of different languages, different faiths, different sexual preferences, all the whole 9 yards. That is what we're all fighting about today and have been fighting about for the last 10,000 years.
We need more people like you and Joe who are articulate and actually put this stuff to practice. Have you guys read William Irwin Thompson?
No.
Linsenfarn. Anyways, I'll send you a link. It sounds like something you might be interested in. It's so many of these names you've dropped today are so much, just saying Silva Mind Control, Rupert Sheldrake, John Cage. So many were just so much aligned with my thinking and studies. So I really appreciate that.
And me too, Jerry. Likewise. I have to, yeah, thank you.
Well, this is Thornton Wilder in 1928. He said, art is confession. Art is the secret told, but art is not only the desire to tell one's secret, it's the desire to tell it and hide it at the same time. You've laid your cards on the table for 90 minutes. I'm not insinuating you haven't already answered this. What's it really all about for you, Paul?
In the long run, it's the simple feeling of being.
Yeah.
That guides everything that I do, and where I find my greatest peace and my greatest inspiration. The simple feeling of being. It's the source of all things. You call it the Tao, perhaps.
Yeah.
Tune into the all, and finding ways to do that more regularly and more consciously. That's what it's all about for me.
Yeah, I agree. Beautiful. What gives you the most optimism?
Children, looking at children and taking care of children, educating children properly, raising them, how we do that. That's why I'm a Steiner educator. I believe in that so strongly. It's the best kept secret. Yeah.
Well, the beautiful thing, Paul, is that's the answer I get the most. What gives you the most optimism? People say youth, children, kids, So that's beautiful. And the first question is, what's the best thing for a human being? Wilhelm Reich says the best thing for a human being is another human being. And the last question, what gives you the most optimism? I got the question they asked Groucho Marx at the end of his life. And he said, other people. So it's sure been fun spending this time with another person like you, Paul. It's really special for me. And I don't know how we connected, but that was super special. I got a double duty interrobang. I got Paul and Joe in one meeting. So even though I'm going to hit the end broadcast button, I hope this never ends and we can keep talking forever and ever.
Absolutely, Jerry. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me today. So appreciate it. Look forward to talking some more with you.
Super cool. Thanks a lot, Paul.